Okay, all right.
Yeah.
There we go. We're good. Okay, yes, I wanted to ask about the 20s. Did you have...
Well, the 20s is when I was bit by the monkey, 1927.
Yes, Jenny said you have to ask her about the monkey. I need to know about that story.
I told you about that, didn't I?
You did, but I don't remember all the details.
Oh, well, the American Legion, which was my father was in, when a carnival would come, the men would help them set up everything. So then they told the kids, he said, tell your kids come over and get free rides. So I was in first grade, that's 1927. And Ginny and I, Ginny lived across the street from me, my cousin. And so we went over there to the carnival. We were sitting on the picnic tables, waiting our turn. And the whole high school boys were teasing the monkeys. They had 3. They used to use them in races. Ben would gamble.
Monkey races.
Monkey races. That's what it was,
This
really.
story keeps getting better. I didn't know they were racing.
Well, one of them got loose and was heading right for a girl in front of us. They could see to her face. When I moved my arm back, and the movement got the monkey's eye, so he came and bit me instead of her, which was a blessing. Imagine a little kid getting bit in the face.
You took one for the team.
You took it, yeah. That's it.
So you were in first grade, and you got bit by a monkey. That's a story not a lot of people can tell, especially in Elmhurst.
And I couldn't feel anything. It was numb, evidently. And Ginny was crying because I got bit. I said, "What are you crying about?" "You're hurt." I could still remember that. "You're hurt." When anybody fell down, well, you know Aunt Ginny, and anybody fell down and skinned their knee or something, oh my goodness, and she'd start crying. So we never roller skated with her anymore. Gosh.
Gil was like that too. Pidgie.
Yeah. Who? Bill?
Pidgey. Remember when I got hurt on my bike and he ran home and told you I was
Yeah, that's
laying
right.
on the ground and
I said,
Who's a Pidgey?
well, that's the nickname we had for him. Gil Jr. Gil. I don't know. Pat traveled with him.
we called him Pidgie.
Oh, this is the next generation. I haven't even started writing these names down yet. So this is what, one of your cousins?
Yeah, his cousin yet. My dad's brother Gil, who was in
Right.
the service, is his oldest son. He had 2 sons.
Gil Jr., but we called him Pidgie.
Pidgey.
I don't know why.
I don't know why.
But I was, yeah.
At some point there was a reason and everyone just forgot it.
And when,
That's how nicknames work sometimes.
Gil was over, he saw Pidge before he left for overseas. He was over there during the war for 2 years. So when he came home, Pidge was 2 years old. But Ginny had been showing him a picture of Gil. And this is your daddy, and he's coming home someday, and so on. So when he came home, Ginny said, "There's your daddy." And he looked at the man and looked. He said, "There's my daddy." I mean, he couldn't place that.
Oh, kids. There's no stories like that about me, because I always made sense. Let me ask you some more about the 20s. Tell me about school. Where did you go to school, like grade school?
Lincoln School.
Lincoln. Okay. What was school like? Like when I was in first grade, we had first and second grade in the same room. I had one teacher. Did you have like first grade by itself? Was it a whole bunch of grades together?
No grades together.
Okay.
We were all separate. And we were very patriotic. We said the Pledge of the Legions in the morning when we stood. And I remember on Armistice Day, now that's November 11th, they call Veterans Day, we all had to stand and bow our heads for a couple of minutes because the war was over, whether there were going to be any more wars. And history, I mean, there was, I didn't get history, but you could tell people were proud that they were Americans, and it was a different attitude, much different. And also, you minded your parents.
Yeah, he wants to get through, I think.
What you want, hon?
You can come through.
I'm going to get my book over there.
Take
I'm reading my own autobiography.
That's good. I
just got find out what happened.
Yeah.
He wants to see what he did.
Don't skip to the end. You won't be able to sleep well if you skip to the end. I'm going to get a copy of that. I just got paid like yesterday, so I'm going to hop on Amazon and get a copy of that because I'd like to know what you've been up to.
Jan, you have.
married my grandmother.
Do
I
you
don't know
have the
much about
copy
you.
of my copy of his book? Tom said he was going to give it to you. And I was wondering
Yeah.
to read.
Either I do
Well,
or I
I'm
give it to
going
him.
through it.
Does he
It
have
says I
it?
got to figure out what happened.
He said he didn't have it. He gave
Any
it to you.
surprises so
Oh,
far?
okay, then I have it.
Yeah. So when you finish
No.
it, give it to him to read.
No, that's why I don't want to get interrupted.
That's good. She just got bit by a monkey, so now we're talking about school because that's the natural transition. Attacked by a monkey, go to school.
And then for Christmas time, the different rooms would practice carols, and each room had a different carol. And then we would go to room and sing. And then the teachers, of course, at that time you could talk about Jesus. And she said, now, why are we celebrating Christmas? Now, this is a public school.
Uh-huh.
Why are we celebrating Christmas? Jesus was born. I had no idea who at that time.
Really?
She didn't say he was son of God or what anything. That was all it was. And so I was there from 1 to 6th grade. And then 7th and 8th grade, junior high, was in the Hawthorn school. And there were no buses then, so I had to walk. I took my bike in the summertime or the springtime. And it was just, and the kids minded. The fact is, I used to bring my knife for recess to play mumbly peg. And Bud wore high tops. They wore high tops when he was in, and he had a place for a knife, and he always carried his knife in there.
Okay.
That's the difference.
It's one of many. I mean, kids still bring knives to school, but it's not to play games in the playground anymore. It's for shivving, like in prison.
Oh, really?
Well, it depends on the school you're in. Thankfully, where my wife and daughter they don't see any of that, but some public schools can be a little rough. In Chicago, they have metal detectors like it's at the airport, because they have to. And that's why I will never live in the city. But this isn't about me.
Yeah.
Do you remember the names of your teachers? Like grade school?
Yeah, let's see. First grade was Mrs. Conway.
Now, did you start in first grade?
Yeah.
Was there preschool back then?
No.
Okay.
No kindergarten.
No preschool kindergarten. You just started at, what, 6 years old
We
then?
just 6 years old. We went to school.
Okay.
And Miss Conway, and then her sister, Miss
She remembers the
Conway,
first grade
was
teacher.
2nd grade. 3rd grade was I know Miss Lewis was my 6th grade teacher.
I can't remember the people I lived with in college.
I don't remember the fifth and 4th grade. That's a shame.
That's okay. For anybody listening along, the other voice is my mother, Janet. I don't refer to you by name, so I'm like, what do I call her? Mom. Jan Weiss. So, in case you're wondering who's making snide comments on the side, the peanut gallery is my mother. So I wanted to ask about history. Like when I learned history in school, we kind of like camped out at the Civil War for a while, and then we camped out at World War II, and that was just like a majority of what we learned.
Yeah.
What would you study in history in school?
We studied the Revolutionary War
Okay.
and the founding of America, and as it grew, we never started with wars.
Okay.
And we started with the beginning and how proud they were that they were free. I can remember that from Britain, because we had that. What was it? The tea. They threw the tea
in the harbor.
overboard.
Yeah, Boston Harbor.
Yeah.
Because the water didn't taste good, so they thought, hey, let's flavor this thing up.
Yeah.
I actually don't remember why they threw all the tea. It was like it was a statement about taxation.
They were taxing the pilgrims too much, and then you don't fool with their tea, and they did, and that was it, and then
It'd be like capsizing a Starbucks today. Right.
Yeah.
That's at least how I've heard it described. It's like, imagine you're trying to make a statement, so you burn down a Starbucks. That's kind of what they did.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that means war.
Yeah. And it was, there was a Crippen in the Revolutionary War, because they were in the States then. And I don't have too much on that.
Pat'll have that. She's got, right, doesn't Pat have the whole history of the Crippen clan back to the Mayflower, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'll get that from her.
Yeah.
You know, filling in the details. So you studied the Revolutionary War. Did you guys study the Civil War?
Yes.
What kind of things did they tell you about that?
They didn't want slavery, and so and of course the South wanted it because they didn't have to pay these people,
Mm-hmm.
and they were getting rich. They picked the cotton and then they sell it, and they didn't want this. They didn't want them to make them citizens, but of course they never did. The South kept things going just the way it was until when? The 50s, was it? Many of the blacks were afraid to go down south. I know I sat, well, that was the 40s, I'll tell you that later. But it was different. When I went down south, I thought, I couldn't believe what I saw.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in the 40s, World War II. So it didn't, they won the war, but it didn't do much for the South right away.
Right. These things take time.
Yeah.
Some of the South were bad losers.
Yeah.
They were not gentlemen about it.
Oh, no.
So you had, it was your great-grandmother's father was in the Civil War, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did the other kids in class know of relatives that they had in the Civil War? Was that something they could talk about? Like,
No,
my generation
I didn't know at that time either.
Oh, you didn't?
That I had any.
Okay.
So
So my generation had grandparents in World War II, but then the following, the generations
Right.
after us
Yeah.
have no connection to that. I guess the next one up would be Vietnam or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so your generation was far enough removed from the Civil War that you didn't have immediate knowledge of family members who'd been
That's
part
right.
of that. Okay.
Yeah, they didn't do genealogies then, I don't think.
Do you remember any of the presidents that were in office while you were growing up? Did anybody ever talk about that
Just
kind of stuff?
Roosevelt.
Okay.
He was in, what was it, 16 years he was in?
That was the 30s, wasn't it?
It was in the 30s, and I graduated in the 40s, so I had Roosevelt the whole time.
Wow.
And then when he died, it was during the war, and everybody was alarmed. Would Truman continue? What would we happen? Now it's going to happen. But everything was fine. He dropped the atomic bombs. And then the generation, well, your generation, they wanted us to apologize
Your
to
people ruined
to
everything.
Japan.
Oh, Obama did.
Yeah.
Obama was like, I'm sorry
They
we had to
started
end
the war,
war.
but they said, well, look, they dropped the atomic bombs. Well, if they hadn't, a lot of those men wouldn't have been grandfathers. And
true.
We were to black. Well, that's a different story.
You kids, you don't appreciate anything.
Probably too much pie.
Oh.
See, because when I was little, I remember Reagan was president, and I remember being pro-Reagan, but only because I saw it at your house. I remember seeing him on TV, and you guys were like, yeah, we voted for him, and I'm like, yay, Reagan. That's all I knew. I didn't know he was an actor. I didn't know why his policies were good. I was just like, hey, he's got an American flag, and his name is Ron. And I didn't know if maybe that was, you guys did baseball as a family growing up. You would go to the Cubs games. Did anybody talk politics when you were growing up? Was that something people did?
They didn't do it.
Okay.
No. That was baseball.
Well, who needs politics when you have baseball?
Right.
Now, when you were born, the Cubs hadn't won a World Series in a few years.
Oh, boy, that's for sure.
It wouldn't until 2016. But, so, you got to see that, which is nice. That's a bit later in the story, but still.
Yeah.
You only had to wait, 92 years to see the Cubs win? Worth waiting, I'm sure. I had notes to myself. Oh, I wanted to talk about the pop culture of the 20s, and probably early 30s. Well, how old were you when 1930 rolled around? You were 8 years old, right? If I'm doing the math right?
I
You were
guess
born in
so.
22.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, I mean, this might be something that actually occurs to you later in like middle school or high school, but like everybody had a radio by the time you're in high school, right? Like people listened to music on the radio and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Before that, we built our own.
You built your own radios?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
My father showed us how to take copper wire, and we put it around, I can't remember what, around something. I don't know how he attached it. Then we had earphones.
Huh.
And we could hear music, or whatever was on. We don't know what station.
You can build your own radio.
So it was, I guess you'd call it a radio. I mean, we could hear it.
Well, if it's playing music, it's got to be a radio.
Yeah.
Or you have tiny musicians in the box somewhere.
I wish I could remember how it was done.
I'm sure you can look it up online. I've never done it, but I guess if you have the right fillings in your teeth, it'll pick up automatically.
Yeah.
I think I heard Carol Burnett talk about that once or something. So when you were like middle school, high school, what kind of music did your friends listen to? What was popular? Like musicians or songs, or what do you remember? Did you guys listen to the jazz?
I don't know really, because I was too interested. My hearing is bad. They didn't have hearing aids. So I heard the different tunes differently.
Oh.
So I never listened much to music. I was more with baseball, because there was no music. And so I had trouble in school because I always wanted to sit in the front. And Miss Lewis, well, she says, we sit alphabetically. Well, L, I'm in the middle.
Sure.
So I sat there, but I couldn't hear her. And then she said, you're not paying attention, you stay after school. And I thought, someday I'm going to punch her right in the nose.
So wait a minute, you had hearing problems in school?
Huh?
You had hearing problems even when you were in grade school?
What grade was Mrs. Lewis?
This was 6th grade. And
Okay.
I was
By middle school.
Yeah.
Did you know you had some kind of hearing problem, or?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Because a couple of times I would think, why can they hear the page number and I can't? I must be sitting in a different type of room,
Sure.
And
You don't really question your own normal experience until
No.
somebody makes you do so.
no. So I had problems with her. And I had problems with, well, that's another story.
Virginia?
Do I need to have her leave the room so you can tell these stories?
No, Miss Lesway. She was a sewing teacher she was in junior high, married by then.
What was the name?
Lesway, but that wasn't her married name. I don't know what her married name.
Oh, was she the gym teacher then in high school or something? Or was it junior high or high school?
No, she wasn't the gym teacher. She was the sewing teacher.
Oh, I had her just at the very end because remember I missed most of junior high and then when I went back.
You had her.
But only the very last month.
Hold
or
on, you
something,
missed
but I
most of
couldn't-
junior high? You missed most of junior high?
Yeah, I had rheumatic fever.
Yeah, she had.
Okay, well, I'm done with your stories. I gotta hear some of hers, because apparently I missed
rheumatic fever. She was
I just
home.
made choir. I was just making cheerleading. The boy that I liked, she asked me to the dance. And then, boom, I was out.
Oh, that'll do it.
And missed everything. And then 8th grade, very last part of 8th grade, I took the government. We had to take a government test. Did you have to take that?
I don't remember.
You know?
Probably did, but I don't remember.
But I was tutored, so I was ahead of
Yeah.
most people. When
Someday my daughter's going to sit down and ask me about my life, and I'm going to go, I don't remember. And that's what she's going to get over and over. Yeah.
Well, when she comes, tell her I can tell her something.
I'm sure you remember my life better than I do. It's
Well, I can remember when we took you to Disney World. And
do
remember,
you?
Jan? And we were going all over. You had money. You kids had money to spend. And you went into this gift shop and this one and this one. And so you piped up and said, I think I'd like to go to the first one. I said, the first one? I don't even know where we are. And you looked at me and said, follow me, Grandma. Remember that?
That does sound like me, yeah.
Follow
And you
me,
led
Grandma.
the way.
And
we
you
got
went
there.
right to
I
it.
have no idea how you did that.
I can remember that. I thought, how does he do
You
that?
must be able to map things in your
That's-
head. No, I can't do that.
Once I get an idea of what it looks like, yes.
Yeah.
I'm good at that. That's where my daughter gets that attitude, though. Because sometimes she just kind of sighs and rolls her eyes at me, and I'm like, what? I'm asking legitimate questions here. And she's like, don't you remember? Like, she'll remember these obscure details from, 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, no, I don't remember that. She's like, oh, Dad. Like, you're 6.
So she does that too.
Yeah, apparently she gets that from me.
Good.
She's a hoot, but that's the 80s. I do want to talk about the 80s when we get there, because I remember some of it, but I imagine there are things that I missed, being that I was in grade school. So tell me about high school. So high school, let's see, this would have been the mid-30s.
Well, let's see, junior high, I think I was 14 when I went as freshman.
Okay.
And just went, because there was a shortage of money, we didn't have a lot of things that they have now. And we had dances, and they called them the, we had to take our shoes off. We would dance
Was it a sock hop?
Sock hop.
There you go.
Yeah, and
Maybe even have
take
them,
our shoes off, and then if we had a date, we go with a date or whatever. And so that was fun. I loved that. And so that was every Friday.
So what did you have for music at a dance?
We had records.
Okay.
Yeah, we had. They were the breakable ones,
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and.
Now, do you remember any of the popular music at dances? Any of the songs or bands or anything that the kids asked for the dances?
No.
No?
Did you have big bands?
You were just busy dancing?
We didn't have big bands. We had the high school played for the prom. I think for the prom we did have an orchestra. But then they had parents, because there wasn't much money, there wasn't any place to go because you didn't have the money.
Sure.
And so the parents would bring the dinner over to us, and we ate in the kitchen. Some of them did go out; they had money. Now for the prom, the senior prom, I went to the junior prom too. I went to all of them. But the senior prom, 3 fellas asked me, and you always ask. You tell them that you have to talk to your mother and father first. So I wanted to go with Bob, and so I told the other 2. I said, "Well, I'll have to see." And my father didn't like Bob. He says, "You can't go with him." And I had already told the other ones I was going out with
Hold on,
someone
why
else.
didn't your father like Bob?
Yeah, because he had his own car and he had speeding tickets, and he was afraid I'd get in an accident.
Oh.
And so.
Okay.
So I got mad at him. I said, "Okay, I won't go to the prom." And with that, I went upstairs to my room. I thought, how dare he? And I could remember being so mad. And so he said, my mother had already bought me a pretty dress to go. And he said, well, go with someone. I said, I won't go. Just forget it. I won't go. Well, then my cousin called me. And he says, I understand you won't go to the prom. I said, nope. And he said, I'll take you. I said, nope, I don't want to go. He says, well, I'm going to take you. I said, Chuck, I'm not going. He says, I'll be there. Well, Chuck came. And I had gotten dressed then, and it was all against me. And so he said, now his last name was Litchfield, just as mine. Hmm. And I said, how in the world am I going to introduce you to my friends and tell them that I'm with my cousin? He said, well, let's see, what name could we use? And he says, think of one. So all I could think of was Schilling. And so when I got there, I introduced him to many of my friends, and he danced with them and so on. And afterwards, he was 4 years older than I was, too. And he was working. And I told my dad when I got older, I said, I still hold that against you, that I couldn't go. I said, I wanted so badly to go with Bob. And I had a crush on him all 4 years. And that didn't go anyplace. And so he says, well, I did it, and I'm glad. And I said, yeah. Then I had to go with my cousin because you wanted me to. And it irked me terribly. But that's the way it goes.
Did you tell him about going downtown on the train to go to the dances, remember, from the
Well, hold on a
Chicago?
second. Can I, before,
It's high school.
right, hold on, but remind me who Chuck is. He's a cousin through,
He's a cousin.
through where?
Oh.
I told you, Uncle Grandpa.
Uh-huh.
It's his son.
Okay.
So he's my
Gotcha.
second son or second cousin or
I
something.
just wanted to know where Chuck had come from. Got
Right.
it. So he was
Uncle,
Chuck Litchfield.
Right.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, what was your question?
You told me about dances. You used to go down to your. You used to take the train, and then somebody would meet you at the train when you came back. Remember, in high school, or no, after high school, I guess, right? Remember when? You
Oh,
went
that
down?
was during the war. That was
Okay.
during the war. I used to go down
Well,
to
where'd you
the
get there?
canteen. They had it where the soldiers and sailors and everybody would come in, and then we would serve them dinner. I'd help the kitchen, and then we dance. And then when I was working, the big bands would come to Waukegan
Oh, nice.
and to the big roller skating rink. It was always one night stands, and so on Saturday they'd be there. Well, after Friday, after work, I had my little suitcase, and I'd go, and my aunt would pick me up, and I'd go to that would be roller skating with the soldiers or sailors on Friday, and then the dance each Saturday that I had danced to Gene Miller. Let's see, who else? Billy, what was his? I can't even remember anymore. And all the big bands came there. They would go to different places. And Waukegan opened these stores, and they had 24-hour shifts for the GIs and for the Navy, because we knew some were going to come back, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And very hospitable. The restaurants stayed open. Most of them would give them free meals because they didn't have much money. And it was one town that felt sorry for the soldiers and the sailors. The Fort Sheridan was closed now, but that was open then. And so we would dance, and then at 12 o'clock, that was it. And then my aunt would pick me up, and I'd go back to her house. And that was good. I liked it. So
that was during
the
World
war.
War II? Okay.
During the war. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
Well, you
that
did have
was-
some fun.
Yeah, I always felt sorry for the fellas. One fellow I danced with, he would just act so sad. He said, I miss my girlfriend so much. So we sat down and he showed me her picture and everything. Well, this was in 1942. I was engaged to Lori. So I showed him a picture of Lori, and I said, where does she live? Southern Illinois. And I said, can't she come up and see you? And he said, I hope she's coming next week. Her folks are bringing her. She couldn't come alone, you know. And this is we couldn't at those days. And I said, no, that wouldn't be right. So so the following 2 weeks after that, what was his name? Red Graham. He had red hair. Red Graham. And I saw him, and he was so happy because he had seen his girl.
All right.
And I don't know if he ever came back from the war or not. You just don't know. But
No, we'll assume he did, and they lived happily ever after. Said we'll assume that he did, and that they lived happily ever after.
yeah,
Then why
I always want him to.
So you had told me that your job after high school was as some kind of number cruncher. That it was. You were basically you did calculator work. You did math for. Remind me what was the business you worked for?
What was their name?
Was it insurance or something?
No, well, that was when I was married. No, this was I can't remember. It was a company that sold to office supplies.
Oh,
let's
yes.
see. And it was
Okay.
Office of Hoarders from, let's see, Hoarders. They got 50% and 10% off of theirs. And then there was one that was 33 1/3. And we had to know this and then figure out what they owe. And I love that. I love figures.
So when you were in school, were you working toward having that kind of job, or was it just...
You know, that's what I wanted. I wanted to be a bookkeeper. I took 2 years of bookkeeping in high school, and I just loved that. And so I went to business school, and so I had to sign some papers, and so I signed them. And she said, "You can't be a bookkeeper." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Because we used pen and ink, and then you had to blot it." She
Right.
said, "They won't hire you because then it takes an extra couple of seconds to pick up the blotter and dry it before you go to the next one." And she said, "You would smear it," which I would.
Being left-handed.
So I said, "Well, I want to work with figures." She says, "Oh, that's easy." So our calculators, which you have now, are pocket ones. Ours were huge, about this big.
Like a cash register, kind of.
Yeah, and then we would figure, and I took it and loved it. And then we had speed tests and everything with it, and I would always win the speed test because they have to stop and pick up their pencil to write. Well, I'm left-handed. And so one of the girls says, "I think she ought to be taken out of the race." She said, "She's always first, just because she's left-handed." And I looked at her, and she was near me. I said, "Oh, shut up."
But so when you were in high school, you wanted to be in a career in mathematics. And then when you got out of high school, you got that job.
Okay.
Or did you get that job before you graduated?
What? No. This was after I graduated.
Okay.
I was in business college first.
Did you work when you were in high school? Did you have jobs during school?
No, I didn't
Okay.
work at all in high school.
Okay.
No, I just was busy dancing.
That's enough. What year did you graduate high school, and where from?
York,
York High School.
1940.
Okay, 1940. So. Oh, 40. Okay. Well, so that was all the 30s. Hold on, let me take a look at my 30s notes. So according to my notes, popular in the 30s was Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Disney's version.
And it was colored, and it was so nice to see colored movies.
Now, did you see Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in the theater? It was 1937.
I saw that.
When we were little. Your mom took Pat and me to see Snow White and Seven Dwarfs,
Yeah.
and we were terrified of the witch. So she finally had to take us out. Because the screen is this big, and when the witch came on, we would have to go and get a drink or go to the bathroom or do something. And so finally, when we were coming back, we went down the wrong aisle, and we couldn't find her, and then we were crying, and she said, "Oh, I think we better go."
It's too scary for some kids. So, did you see Wizard of Oz in the theater?
Yeah.
That was 39, I
That
believe.
was, yeah.
And then, what about the Marx Brothers movies? They had a handful in the 30s.
I saw most of those, I think.
Did you like the Marx Brothers? Were they popular?
They were very popular.
Like amongst your friends, your set?
Yeah, I think so. We would say, see, I was a Girl Scout mainly because I only had to pay a dime to get in the show. And but I learned a lot in the Girl Scouts. And my girlfriend and I would have our dimes, and off we go. And we saw all. We would always go at Friday nights, and so that we could see because they were usually Thursday, Friday, and Saturday were shows, and then Sunday, Monday were shows. Then Tuesday and Wednesday, and so we used to love that. So they were funny. And Bud Abbott and Lou Costello were funny.
Yeah. Abbott and Costello. I forgot. They had a string of movies. I know them mainly from their TV work. But I like the Marx Brothers. I have like all of their movies on DVD. So I'm amused at the idea that you got to see them in the original release.
Yeah.
Now, also in my notes, there were things like the 1937 Hindenburg explosion.
Mm-hmm.
Was that something that you remember happening?
We heard the announcer crying when it exploded.
This is you were listening to it on the radio?
Yeah. I now, this was, it was a Sunday, I think, wasn't it?
Oh, I don't know. I just have the note that it was 1937, which I only know because I looked it up.
Yeah, I don't,
My fifth
I
grade
can
teacher
remember
showed
him
us.
crying, or maybe I saw that in the movies. We used to get the news on the movies before.
Oh, that's right. The previews.
Yeah.
Real news.
And we get, and I bet that's what it was, because I remember it was a picture of him, and then at the explosion, and that was horrible.
Mm. Prohibition, I am told by Google, went from 1920 to 1933. Was
Mhm.
that something you were aware of as it was happening? Or as it ended?
Yeah, we were. We knew there was a lot of gangsters there in Chicago, and Dr. Schultz, who lived down the street from us, had a black car. No one would buy a black car because the gangsters all had them, but he had a black. I don't know what make it was, and he was in Chicago, and he was at a stop-and-go light, and a car pulled up next to him and a machine gun, and then took off.
Oh, man.
And he lived, but he was badly scarred. In those days, they didn't know how to do facial and stuff, you know.
He got shot in the face by Chicago gangsters
Mm-hmm.
because he was driving the wrong make of car.
Well, they just figured it was another. It wasn't their gang. They were in gangs, and so they just shot him. Black car.
So Chicago hasn't changed all that much, I guess.
So
That's good to hear. Here I thought it was getting worse, but apparently it's
Ah, really?
it's always been a place to get shot in the face because you have the wrong color of something.
What kind of car?
it's there was gangsters all over Chicago. In fact, is when we were in the we were in the pool in Roswell once swimming, and another couple came up and we got to talk. He said, "Where you from?" And Lori says, "Chicago." He says, "Chicago."
Yeah. I even got that when I was traveling.
Yeah. My goodness. And you know, so from then on we said Elmhurst.
Right. Chicago is still, like, most of my life, it's known internationally for Al Capone and Michael Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
Like, up
John
until...
Dillinger.
Mom, didn't you go down in the underground tunnels?
Oh, yeah, we did that.
Tell them about that. There's tunnels underground in Chicago. Tell them about.
Well, that's in the China neighborhoods. My Uncle Roger, they lived in Elmhurst then, had to watch those tunnels underneath. You could go from this street through tunnels, way over maybe 2 streets or so on. They were all connected somehow, but they had opium in there.
Oh, dear.
And so they had like smoking dens. So my uncle worked for the government, and so they had to go in and close them all. And so he said, "Would you like to see some of them?" And my dad says, "Yeah." And I thought, well, your God would go into a tunnel. So we went. And so he took us, I remember, we went down one street, I don't remember the name of it now, and walked and walked and walked and walked. And pretty soon we came up, and he says, we started 3 streets ago. And he took us different little, he says, this is from this Chinese restaurant, this is from this. That's all I remember. And I guess they closed them all, and I don't know how they cemented or what they did. But
So, all right, let me start at the top here. Uncle Roger.
mm-hmm.
Now, where is he in the family?
No, he isn't.
Oh, he was just...
It was friends of my parents.
Okay,
We called them aunt and uncles.
gotcha. And he worked for the government, like, what, FBI or something, or?
I don't know.
Was there an
All I
FBI?
know it was the government, and then
Okay.
from there he was sent to Brownsville, Texas, because there's an entrance there to get in from Mexico, and he understood Spanish, so he was there, and he was one of the guards there.
All right.
And then from there he was transferred to Hawaii, and I don't know what he did in Hawaii. And Emily, when he
If you're
died
in Hawaii, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You're in Hawaii.
Yeah. So.
Okay. So did you know of a neighbor who got shot up by gangsters, but do you know anybody who knew any of the gangsters in Chicago? Like, was there any connection or?
No.
Okay. So that was way off on the peripheral and not part of your lives in Elmhurst. What about, did you hear about or did you get to experience the 1938 War of the Worlds broadcast by Orson Welles?
We missed that, but the next day, I mean, the talk was for days and days about it, and what happened, and how some people got so frightened, and we did hear it.
Did you have friends who heard it and thought it was real?
It was in school. A couple of them did, because we went to school, and did you hear about one? And then they'd explain what they heard, and that was exciting. I thought, I wish I had heard that.
So when did people start to all understand? Oh, this was all fake.
They were mad at Orson Welles.
Well, did they know that day that it was fake, or did it take a couple days for some people to realize that this was just a play?
No, they tried to tell him when the program was over with. That's how it all started. But it took days before people would believe it. And they were so mad at Orson Welles that they wanted to blackball him from everything.
Speaking of Orson Welles, I didn't write down when it came out, but Citizen Kane. Did you see Citizen Kane in the theaters? Did you remember hearing about it?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So I didn't.
What about Metropolis? Now Metropolis was 27, so that was a little earlier. But did you know any science fiction nerds who saw that or talked about it?
No.
Okay. Do you know what Metropolis is?
No.
Metropolis is I want to say it's German, like Fritz Lang directed. It's this story that takes place in the distant future where the human race has a ruling class and then a subservient underground working class that just like keeps the world going. It's this kind of weird dystopian thing. And it's been kind of like the foundation of all the weird dystopian science fiction that's followed. Like movies made today look at that for sort of their world building.
Hunger Games.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Sounds
Actually a lot like Hunger Games, except that Hunger Games doesn't have robots. Whereas
like
this one has robots.
Time Machine. Did you see that movie?
A couple of them, yeah.
Yeah.
That was H.G. Wells.
The one of them was where the people were all underground.
Kind of like that.
Yeah.
Only that in the Time Machine, that had an evolutionary instead of a economic separation of classes. Whereas the ones underground were sort of like devolved people who were more animalistic. Mm-hmm. Whereas this is more sort of a bourgeois versus proletariat kind of the rich keep the poor as functioning machines so that they can live,
Yeah.
But again, I mean, that's... it's just the special effects for the time were really good, kind of like it set the stage for what would follow, just like Citizen Kane did in terms of drama. I'm a movie nerd, apparently. I'm listening to myself talk. I'm like, oh, movie nerd. You know your 1927 cinema. All right, well, that's all that I had pulled up for the 30s, 20s pop culture. Let me see where we are. Thinking back on high school, what was your impression of it? Like, did the kids in high school like school? Did they enjoy it? Is it something that they just sort of slugged through and tolerated?
Well, we couldn't do much, so we enjoyed it because we had something to do.
Okay.
You really couldn't spend money, and so we all just accepted it. That's all. It was, you go to school, that's it.
Were there, what sports teams and stuff did they have extracurricular?
They had football and baseball.
Okay.
And basketball.
Did girls play any sports?
Well, some sports. I got in trouble with that. The gym teacher, first of all, she treated her like military. There were numbers on the wall or on the floor, and she did us by height.
Okay.
And so after that, right dress and so on, bunch of junk. And then she said, because you are going to be ladies, we don't like to run too much. So we have 3 courts of basketball. Most boring thing you've ever seen. So she had to go out. She had to be called out. So I said, let's play toddler. and I got the different size, and boy, we played and ran back and forth. So when she comes back, and she says, "Who did this?" I said, "Me." And so I had to go see Mr. Letts. But Mr. Letts was so nice. He was principal. And I told him what I did and why. And I said, "We're bored with that." He said, "I don't blame you." He says, "Well, just don't do it again because she might come back again." Or he says, he said, "Have a lookout if you're going to do it
Good
again."
advice.
Isn't that nice? Oh, he was nice. He one of the basketball teams we always played Glen Ellen, and they were our enemy. And we went to one, and I don't remember why, but we booed at the team for something they did. I don't know what it was. And so the next day there was an assembly called, and we all sat and we had our classes together, and then L's all here and so on. And he says, "I am ashamed." I can remember this. "I am ashamed of all of you. You booed. You don't boo at a basketball game. How?" Oh, he went on and on and on and on about that. Well, by the time he got through, we all felt about so big.
Mm.
And we never booed again. Football, anything. But I thought that was good. And after I grew up, we were all a little, "Oh dear, what did we do?" And we talked about it a lot. But our school, when I went to school, there really didn't have to be any discipline because nobody did anything.
Well,
We were there to study. We were there then to go home, and a lot of them had jobs because they helped the ends meet,
mm-hmm.
and that was it.
Was there a theater program in high school?
No.
No? Nobody put on plays?
Wait a minute.
There wasn't a spring musical?
They started that. I was a junior. Yeah, they did. Then that's when it started. Before that, kids weren't around too much. Now, when we had the sock hops, they were over with. We were out at 3:30, 4:30. That was it. Just an hour.
Oh, just
and
after
because
school.
they had to get home, and there was no buses, so the ones that had to go to Addison or to Villa Park had to walk.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So.
I hadn't thought of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you know the theater kids?
No.
Okay, they're all weirdos.
No. Are they?
I was one of them, so I know. They were my people. They're all weirdos. Were there after-school clubs or things that weren't sports, like other than baseball and football? Was there like a chess club or a
Yeah,
home
there
ec club?
was.
Or?
Yeah, I don't remember all of the different names, but I didn't go to any of them.
Yeah.
And I don't know, most people didn't. I think they quit them after a while because the kids were going home to work or maybe take care of the little kids while the mother went to work.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of this going on. So.
So in high school, most of the kids were already part of helping the family function as opposed to just being kids.
Yeah.
It's a different day.
Mm-hmm. So,
Okay. But in general, I mean, was it just you were glad to have school because it gave you something to do, or did kids really enjoy learning? Or was it just dependent on the individual?
It was just something we were supposed to do.
Okay.
That's all. We were supposed to go to school. We were supposed to do this. We were supposed to do that.
Okay.
So
what did you do after school? Because you said you didn't have a job in high school.
no, my father wouldn't let me because he made a pretty good salary.
Okay.
And we had my grandmother living with us, my great-grandmother. Then Uncle Frank lost his job, so he and Aunt Rose came to live with us. Our house was a little crowded. And so what did I do? I did my homework and talked to my grandmas and my mother and my aunt and enjoyed that. And if in the summertime, I mean, if it was warm, we'd go out and play catch, Bud and I. And then there was a prairie behind us that the railroad owned. And we got permission to cut the grass and make a baseball diamond. And so we just went there. We choose up time games and then rather kids for the different sides, and that's what we did. I mean, you had to think of free things because people did. If they had money, wouldn't give it to kids. Were afraid they'd lose the job or something. So, and there weren't many cars. They took the train to work, and my dad drove because there was no train going southern Chicago because that's where his plant was, and there was no salt for ice, and in the wintertime they had chains, and of course we could ice skate on the street then because it was all ice.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
You got ice skate to school.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
that's
didn't. We roller skated to school. In grade school. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't have a bike until 7th grade. And my folks thought, better buy me a bike because I'll be going to Hawthorn. And I could take that till it gets cold. And I took it when it was cold and if there was no snow coming or anything. But, so, it was a good time.
Did your mother have a job ever outside the home?
No.
Okay.
She was a private secretary for Mr. Butler. There's a Butler company. And that's how my folks met. I got to tell you this story.
Yeah.
And my dad worked on the labor bit with cartons and stuff and moving things in the trucks. And they never met. But when World War I broke out, some of the fellows left, and my dad was one of them. And he joined the Navy. And so Mr. Butler said, have we lost a lot of men? And they said, yes. He says, get their names and their addresses. And so my mother did. And he says, now put them in a hat and have the women draw one. And so he did. He announced that you all got a name. You women, I want you to write a letter once a week to tell them what's going on here. They'll be lonesome. And so my mother, she loved to write letters. I would get page after page after page. Me, I like to say, hi, I'm fine. That's it. And so my mother got my dad. And so she found out he was from Waukegan. So she got a Waukegan newspaper and took out different articles she thought he'd be interested in and put them in the letters and told him what they were doing there. She made very interesting letters. And so she said that after the war, a couple of months later, she gets a call. Could she have lunch with so-and-so, Art Litchfield? And she said, oh, who's he? Oh, the one I wrote to. So she did. And so they had lunch, and he wanted to thank her. He said, you know, your letters kept us going, and I would pass them around. He said, that was wonderful, getting the Waukegan news and everything. And so he said, I appreciate that. So that was it. And so later on, he calls her at the office. He didn't know where she lived. And then he says, I'd like to take you out Saturday. And so, well, okay. And she told him where he lived. Well, they started going together. And that was it.
Well, there you go.
So
that's fun. She was his pen pal before they'd really even met.
yeah.
That's interesting. Usually it goes the other way.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
I never knew that.
And so here you are.
Yep.
Oh, fun.
Oh.
Right. Well, let's pause there, and we can
Okay.
reconvene with more stories in a bit.